On the 2-year anniversary of this channel, I unveiled my latest project, a full English patch of Kingdom Hearts Mobile, complete with custom implementation of scrapped content. This was a massive undertaking that has been in the works since the KH Mobile video series wrapped up in March. I want to give some behind-the-scenes commentary on what it took to create the patch, plus some insights into some of the translations, graphics, and restored content. First, let's understand the scope of the project. Kingdom Hearts Mobile consists of 8 minigame applications, all of which need to be translated from Japanese to English. This includes both the text and the graphics. On top of the translation work, there are a few game-breaking bugs I need to code solutions for, plus I had the crazy idea of restoring cut content that was left in the files. At first, I was a bit apprehensive about adding anything to the games. After all, my #1 priority is preservation. But I came around to the idea of adding in this cut content for a few reasons. 1, all of the original levels are untouched and presented as is. 2, any restored content can only be accessed after 100% of the original game is cleared. 3, anything added for the English patch is clearly delineated in the manual for each game. And 4, re-implementing cut content from 15-year-old games is just plain cool, and a fun challenge to boot. In general, the work was split up into 3 categories: text editing, graphics editing, and programming. On the surface, text editing sounds like the easiest of the tasks. Just take the Japanese and replace it with English. But there are a lot of constraints and considerations that you probably wouldn't think about. The main problem that will crop up everywhere is that English text takes up more space than Japanese. Even though I had already done a lot of the translation work from my initial video series, the direct English translation would be too many characters to fit on screen. A good example of this is the magical canvas puzzle descriptions. The Japanese text was already margin to margin, so fitting the English version in was a challenge. I had to make judgment calls about what information is the most important while trying to remain as authentic as possible. Something has to get cut, but the overall meaning should still be the same. A smaller issue I came across was the limitations of character encoding. KH Mobile primarily uses an encoding scheme called Shift-JIS. Essentially, this is how it converts numbers in the files into text on the screen. Since it's designed for Japanese text, it only has a very basic Latin and Cyrillic alphabet. This means that it's impossible to display the accented E in Namine or the O in Daifugo. I considered a few workarounds, such as overlapping a second text box with an apostrophe to give the appearance of an accent, but it wasn't practical. This limitation wasn't a factor when I was doing graphics editing, though. For all of the menu options, headers, and basically anything that was fancier than the default system text, I had to edit the image files in Photoshop. As long as it could fit in the image file, I could use whatever font I wanted, so accents weren't a problem. For each bit of text, I spent a lot of time trying to match the exact color, outline, and shadowing of the original Japanese. Early on in the process, I decided that I only wanted to use fonts that have appeared in the Kingdom Hearts series, specifically around or before the time of KH Mobile if I could help it. My go-to font was DFP Soge, or one of its variants, which have been in the series since KH2 and have become the primary user interface font from the remixes onwards. Melody of Memory has this for its song titles, which is why I use it on all the chyrons on my videos. The other main pick was a special KH menu font, which I borrowed from the files of KH2. The original Japanese version of KH Mobile already used this font for a lot of its English text. There's also Serpentine, the subtitle font for a lot of KH logos, which I use for the support character graphics in KH Spider Solitaire. The Revolution graphic in KH Daifugo I made with Frizz Quadrata, the font family used in the Kingdom Hearts coded logo. For some of the basic stylized text in KH Balloon Glider, I use Cinema Calligraphy as a base, which is the dialogue font in the Key series. In general, a lot of care went into making the experience as KH as possible. One of the major issues with this plan is that the screens are super small, only 240 by 240 pixels. None of these fonts are designed to be that tiny, and scaling them down just leaves you with a blurred mess. Most of the time, I was fine with doing manual touch-ups, but the menu options were far too numerous. So I chose the normal person option and made my own custom 12-pixel font. I took DFP Soge, scaled it down, and cleaned it up pixel by pixel until I had a neat, uniform alphabet. This saved me a ton of time in the long run, I think. Another thing I have to consider is, again, English is a lot less compact than Japanese. Even with a custom low-pixel font, some words are just too long to fit in the menu boxes. The biggest culprit is the massive Avatar Kingdom button that sits on every single opening menu. Even the Japanese version was a bit squished, so I just tried my best. Other times there was no workaround. Sorry, but there's no way I'm fitting Queen of Hearts in a 56-pixel box. There are some cases where the original Japanese was pressed to fit in the space. Kanji compression is a really interesting subject. This blob of pixels is completely incomprehensible on its own, but when in context, it's easily recognized as this full character. Masahiro Sakurai has a good video that talks about it, but I digress. Sometimes, the English word would fit in the menu space just fine, but the game wasn't prepared to handle the full width. In cases like the balloon glider menu options, the game was programmed to display exactly as much space was needed for the Japanese characters and not a pixel more, even though there's plenty of room on the screen for more text. In these situations, I'd have to go into the game code and change the dimensions of where it was reading the image file. In cases where I made changes to the layout of the image files, I have to completely recode the image boundaries. That seems like as good a segue as any to talk about the programming side of things. For anyone who isn't familiar with how early 2000s Japanese phone games are programmed, which I imagine is most of my audience, let me show you what I was working with. These games are written in Doja, a proprietary Java profile by the mobile phone carrier NTT Docomo. If I wanted to look in the code to understand how the game works, what I'm working with is decompiled bytecode. I understand that's probably gibberish to most of you, so here's an example. Imagine the level select menu for a game. In a normal world, the code would look something like this. The code looks at the value of the player input and chooses an operation based on what button it is. Even if you don't have any programming experience, you can probably understand what's going on at a basic level. Pressing up or down changes the currently selected menu option and displays its description. Pressing start selects the chosen level, pressing back sends you to the main menu, and each option also plays a sound. Now, the actual code would have more complete syntax and some extra math to handle wrapping around the top and bottom of the menu, but this is the general idea. Let's compare that to decompiled Doja. This is the actual code for the level select screen of KH Pair Card Battle. The way the developers encoded the application, there are no names for anything when looking at the decompiled bytecode. The first variable or method is named A, the second one is named B, and so on. This is extremely unhelpful, and it doesn't help that the letter A can have a completely different meaning from one line to another depending on the context. Now, I can tell you that super.a.e is the user input, and 17 corresponds to the up arrow key, but that's only because I figured it out myself. I spent hours experimenting and studying the code, and I could tell you the purpose of every single line in this function, but it was a long process to get here. Of course, this is easy mode. What I just showed you is only applicable for viewing the code. If I want to edit it, I have to work with the original bytecode, which looks like this. This is actually the exact same level select screen I showed you before. Forget A and B, at this level we don't even have variable names to look at. And keep in mind, a basic menu is one of the simplest examples I can find. The actual game mechanics are many times more complex. If nothing else, I at least learned a lot about assembly programming, I suppose. Anyway, I want to make it clear that if I'm ever talking about editing the code of KH Mobile, this is what I'm dealing with. Before we get into the specifics of each game, I want to share what has been the bane of my existence for the entire course of this project, the how to play guides. Translating the text is easy, but putting in the game is an accursed task, because the 8 applications all disagree on how to store the text. Balloon Glider has it in a text file where each page is 12 lines. If you want fewer than 12 lines, too bad, just put a bunch of empty lines to fill the file out. But adding more pages is easy, all you need to do is add an extra 12 lines. Daifugo uses the same system, but it reads in at 10 lines at a time instead of 12 because it feels like it. Magical Canvas, Pair Card Battle, Rhythm Parade, and Reversi also use a text file, but it's set up completely differently. The length of each page is determined by a list of pointers at the top of the file, but the number of pages is hard-coded into the game completely separate from the file. Some of these games also store pop-up congratulations messages in the same file, but not all of them. The Spider Solitaire and Gunny Ship Studio apps don't even use a text file, they just hard-code the entire how to play guide as a string array where each page is a value. Oh, and some of these games represent new lines with the new line hex code, some of them use the ASCII escape character, and some of them use a $sign. All I'm asking for is a little consistency to make my life easier. There's no reason for every other game to have its own text storage system. Next, I want to go through game by game and point out some specific decisions or problems that I found interesting. The first game I did was KH Balloon Glider, since it's probably the simplest minigame as far as translations go. I needed to redo the menu options, how to play guide, and some beginning and end of level text, but that was about it. Doing this one first was a bit strange, since I soon discovered that it uses a different menu setup from every other application, but it was still a pretty smooth start. There were some challenges though, like the issue with the menu text that I described earlier. The only interesting translation for this one is the message at the start of the level. It shows you the number of prizes you need to clear the level and the text, "grab them all." In the original Japanese version, the number of prizes is part of the sentence. A literal translation is closer to, "let's grab 60." But while the Japanese sentence construction lets you start the sentence with the number, that would feel stilted in English. I could have chosen 60 prizes needed or something like that, but I felt it was more important to preserve that upbeat go-get-'em attitude. This is also before I learned to fully control images, so I didn't consider moving the number to the middle of the sentence, but even if I did, the honey symbol would still be in the way. Plus, at this point, I was sort of attached to the simple charm of grab them all, so it's here to stay. The second minigame I translated was KH Magical Canvas. Apart from the limited space I had for puzzle descriptions, as I mentioned before, there's only one major roadblock. When you're solving a puzzle, there are two input modes named consecutive and sniggle. The current mode is shown by the Japanese characters beneath the timer at the top left of the screen. There's absolutely no way that I'm fitting the word consecutive in that little box, and if I just used the first letter of each word, the meaning wouldn't be clear to first-time players. Instead, I localized the modes as drag and tap, which gets across the same message in fewer characters, though even that was a struggle to fit in the 15x15 layout. In the final version of the game, this tip is in the how to play manual. If you get a gold crown in every stage, something good might happen. So I went ahead and got a gold crown in every stage, and nothing happened. See, the code checks for any puzzles in the file that begin with the Japanese word for bonus, and displays them if your save file has reached a certain point. But there aren't actually any of these puzzle files in the game, and the trigger for updating the save file is never coded in. There's also an unused congratulations message for unlocking these mysterious bonus puzzles. To fix this, I created my own set of custom puzzles as an extra treat for anyone who plays the English translation. I studied the original puzzles and did my best to create new ones in the same style. Like official puzzles, I pulled from Chain of Memories sprite work and a few model renders, and I tried to format the white space in a similar fashion. I kept everything in the perspective of the 2009 release date, both in the source artwork and the puzzle descriptions. As an additional bonus, I threw in the example puzzle that was left in the game files. Number 3 was Cage Spider Solitaire. The main thing about this game is that all of the text is in different unique colors. We have the blue and gold main menu options, the white or gray options buttons, the light blue outlined difficulty select, the dark blue difficulty indicator in the menu, the golden difficulty indicator during gameplay, and the fancy purple pop-up for the support powers. Other than that, the main focus was the logo. For most games, the logo has the subtitle in English with the katakana below it, so I left it untouched. This game is different because it has two subtitles. The full title is Kingdom Hearts Card Struggle Spider Solitaire. The first subtitle is written in English, and the second in Japanese. I wanted to translate the logo without losing the existing Japanese. This went through several iterations before the final version you see in the patch. One of the benefits of going through the code of Spider Solitaire is that I was finally able to answer a mystery from my original video. Back then, I could not figure out how to unlock the final 5 hard stages in challenge mode. I can now tell you that you need to unlock every other hard stage, and then earn a high score of 20 rounds in endless mode. No other level requires you to play endless mode to unlock, and I even tried testing this during my initial playthrough, but I only went up to 10 rounds. Kingdom Hearts Paracard Battle is my pride and joy. No other game forced me to develop such a thorough understanding of its inner workings the way Paracard Battle did. After all, my mission wasn't just to translate the dialogue, but to finish the heap of unused content left behind in the game files. The game had 18 cards that were cut from the final implementation, and only the 8 Keyblade cards had any effect programmed in, so I had to create and code entirely new effects for the rest of the cards. Before I could create new cards, I had to create new levels to use them in, since I wanted to preserve the original stages exactly as is. It took over an entire day of work to add a second column to the level select menu. Just a simple menu has a ton of requirements. It has to be able to accept left and right inputs, but only if the EX level is unlocked in your currently selected row, and if not, the EX symbol shouldn't even be displayed, and then it has to know which level to play based on both the left, right, and up-down position of the cursor, and on and on. Then I had to fix all of the issues that adding an extra set of level caused, which really tested my understanding of the game. For example, if you selected an EX level, paused and quit to the menu, resumed the game, paused and quit to the menu again, then deleted the suspended game, the cursor would go out of bounds due to a quirk of how the menu position updates. Now that I could play custom levels, I needed to complete all of the cut content. The Keyblade cards were already programmed to act like the Kingdom Key that did make it into the final game, so I just had to alter the spawning code to pick a random Keyblade card from the set. Similarly, while the Roxas and Ansem cards had no effect programmed in, they were located right next to the rest of the Organization 13 cards, so I added them to the existing spawn pool. Not satisfied, I also gave them a hidden second effect. Matching Roxas decreases your anti-form value, making anti-form less likely to appear in place of a normal dry form, and matching Ansem increases your anti-form value, doing the opposite. I think the idea of Roxas soothing your inner darkness and Ansem bringing it out was a fun way to play around with the existing game mechanics. For the Moogle Room cards, I thought it would be fitting for them to give money. Easy enough. Next were the key cards from Chain of Memories. I chose to make them a set. Matching the Key of Beginning would spawn the Key of Guidance, matching that would spawn the Key to Truth, and matching that final pair would refill your entire drive gauge for your efforts, assuming you get all 3 matches before they despawn. I also added a despawn timer to the Gimmick card. In Chain of Memories, they really shake up the battle to give you some sort of advantage, so made them wipe out the entire board here. It doesn't give you any rewards, but it can help you out in a pinch. After that was Sleeping Darkness. I decided that these cards would sometimes spawn in place of the existing Teeming Darkness cards, but if you tried matching them, you'd take a bit of damage instead of having no effect at all. The final two unused cards were the special cards added in Chain of Memories. In that game, the gold card allowed you to reload premium cards. I tried to create a parallel effect in pair card battle, having them turn back the timer by 10 seconds when matched. The platinum card was easy. Just like Recom, it gives invincibility, which I put on a 10-second timer. I also had to create new graphics to show the effects of the special cards. Going through the effort of imagining new effects for the unused cards just makes me wonder what the maker's original intentions were. It's a shame that so much content was removed during development, but I hope the additional changes I've made provide a fun look into what could have been. Kingdom Hearts Rhythm Parade was tricky. Unlike the other minigames, Rhythm Parade interfaced with the main Avatar Kingdom application to get the user's custom avatar. Since the servers are no more, a third of the stages became completely broken. The game refused to progress until the player's avatar reached a certain frame in its animation, but without an avatar, the level was stuck in an infinite load waiting for an animation that never came. I went into the code and bypassed these checks, and then forced the game to wait a number of frames equal to the animation as to not mess up the timing of events. Only after going through this process did I have enough knowledge to implement a simpler solution. Just make the game load the existing Sora sprites instead of an actual avatar file. Although the game was now technically playable, it was still a nightmare, since the audio tracks are delayed when played through an emulator. That wouldn't do for a rhythm game, so I coded in 1 millisecond of delay to a function that spawned the notes, making it line up with the music again. However, if you play with the sound effects turned on, the game itself produces so much delay that everything is messed up again. Plus, I'm not sure if a different device or emulator setting might affect things. So I moved the delay time into a new data file so anyone could set their own 2 custom delays with and without sound effects. Last up in Rhythm Parade was the restoration of the Traverse Town level. The avatar sprites, world background, and title card were all in the game files, but it was missing the actual stage data. So I reverse engineered the file structure and created a chart for the song, which is unlocked as a bonus stage if you clear all of the original tracks on hard mode. All in a day's work. Hey, I'm recording this bit the day before the patch goes live. Everything is ready for launch. I sent the files off to my buddy Penguin Strain at the Keitai World server, and he and I were chatting about how it's a shame that Rhythm Parade can't have custom avatars. And then something he said triggered an idea in my brain and I couldn't let it rest. So last night, less than 40 hours before the reveal, with the premiere already scheduled, I opened up the Rhythm Parade files and did not close them until I had a working avatar select menu. I worked through the night to 7 AM, but the result was worth it. You can now play as any character in the game. Not all characters have battle sprites, so if you play a battle stage with one of them, it will default to Sora instead. The same thing will happen if you play as a character that's already in the level, since the game can't process 2 of the same avatar at once, excluding the extra Sora that I added in place of the custom user avatar. But in general, you can play as any of the 30 characters on most stages. For the characters that only appeared in race-style stages, they were missing the level clear bonsai animation that is needed for every level, so I just copied over their default pose. It looks a bit weird that they don't celebrate, but it's a fair compromise to have them playable. In this process, I also discovered references to a Moogle and Kairi avatar in the files, but there are no sprites for either of them in the final game. Anyway, that's how I ended up coding an entire new mechanic at the 13th hour. Back to the regularly scheduled ramble. I translated the entirety of Gummy Ship Studio in a span of 24 hours, so I don't really have much to say about it. It helps that it was the simplest minigame since I had started way back with Balloon Glider. There's only graphics, plus some level descriptions and the standard how to play guide, meaning I barely had to touch the code outside of substituting text. Much like Balloon Glider, however, Gummy Ship Studio was a launch title, which means they didn't have a standardized file system yet. Whereas every other game stores all menu options in one big file, Gummy Ship Studio felt the need to split every single individual line of text into its own GIF, which was a mild inconvenience. For the world and item descriptions, the full translation was too long to fit into the display menu, so I had to truncate the English version slightly. The only other thing of note is the Game Over graphic. It already has the words Game Over in both English and Japanese, so I kept it as is, making it one of the few pieces of Japanese text still in the patched build. The sprite is actually shared with our next game, so both have the dual language graphic. I saved KH Jaifugo for near the end because I knew it was the biggest game, but it didn't turn out to be that bad. After all, I had already done all the translation work, and since this was for a canon story, the translations were already more refined. I had to shorten some of the character dialogue due to a soft 24 character limit, but that only affected 30 out of the 250 lines. And then I discovered something new. 2 sets of dialogue that I'd never seen before. In my first behind the scenes video, I shared Sora's win and lose dialogue for each level, but it turns out there are 4 sets of lines altogether. 1 if you lose, 1 if you win with 1000 points, 1 if you win with 1100 points, and 1 if you win with 1200 or more points, or within 3 rounds of cards. There's also the small matter of a game-breaking crash that would occur at the end of every level. I had assumed that it had something to do with the servers being down, since the crash happened on the screen where it adds money to your Avatar Kingdom account. But no, apparently it was just trying to display a graphic for -30 frames. 3 hours of debugging for a 30-second fix. The same screen has a second crash that I haven't been able to fix. If you clear all 8 worlds in one go, you'll get an array index out of bounds exception when it tries to give you money. I'm pretty sure this is only in the offline version, but it takes 40 minutes of gameplay just to test whether or not it crashes, so I'm just leaving it as is. I'm sure we'll be fine. Here's a fun tidbit: I had to design part of the Revolution graphic. Going from 2 Japanese characters to 10 English letters meant that the spacing would be a bit different, covering up part of the design work but revealing the flags. The pattern on the flags was indecipherable in the original, so I decided to turn it into a crown. The other gameplay graphics were less interesting, but the devs felt the need to give each one its own unique color gradient, so I spent a long time matching the text styles. Last, and maybe also least, is Kingdom Hearts Reversi. The character dialogue is mostly lifted from Cage Daifugo, which is why I did this game last, but Kairi and the Neverland characters required a bit of additional translation. My favorite Marluxia line from Daifugo, "Even the cards betray me," was fittingly changed to "Even the stones betray me." Also, Jafar was randomly given one of Maleficent's lines, not sure what was up with that. The main distinguishing feature of Cage Reversi was infrared multiplayer, so while all of the text is translated, no one will actually get to see it on an emulator. For all of the games actually, there are a bunch of translations that I hope no one will ever see. If you get the message that your app has received an update, then something is terribly wrong. Finally, I want to acknowledge everyone who contributed to this project. While the bulk of the work was a personal undertaking, I couldn't have done it alone. My MVP is Yuvi from the Keitai World server, who's responsible for the Keitai World Launcher, the platform that all of the emulators launch from. He's the one who got the online leaderboards up and running too, which aren't working at the time of recording, but might be back up by the time the video goes out. I also owe a lot to other members of the Keitai preservation community. Naoya Shinota, for recovering and preserving the minigames in the first place, Memory Hunter, for bypassing the network checks to get the apps running, and Penguin Strain, who was my main point of contact and also helped catch an important last-minute error while I accidentally increased a game's size by 50% by leaving in a Photoshop file. Oops. The beautiful key art was gifted to me by PJ from Cabletown. I love how it incorporates, well, a bit of everything, and it really makes the project feel like a real game release. Thanks also to the Requiems for artistic advice and feedback, and to everyone who plays and enjoys the games. It's up to us to make sure that Kingdom Hearts Mobile doesn't get forgotten a second time.